Welcome back. Let's practice using the basic percent equation. All right, so here's our first example. We want to know what percent of 125 is 75. And so this is a problem that we can solve using the basic percent equation, which looks like this. It says that P times B is equal to A, where P represents a percent, B represents the base, or the whole number in the scenario, and A represents the resulting amount, or the part of the whole. That part is a fraction or percentage of the whole or the base. And so what we want to do here is translate this sentence into an equation of this form. And so to do that, we need to identify the different parts of this equation within our sentence. And I always like to start by identifying the percentage. I think that's the easiest to find, so that's where I like to start. And in this case, our question is asking what percent of 125 is 75? All right, so we don't actually have the percent this time. That is our unknown value, but we can still identify that that part of this sentence represents our percent P. Now after that, we have the word of, and that word translates to the operation of multiplication. So we have P multiplied by 125, which will be the base. The base, or the whole number, will always come after the word of. All right, so that 125, the value that comes after the word of, is our value of B. And then after that, we have the word is, which translates to an equal sign. So we have P times B is equal to 75. That is all we have left here, which means that that 75 must be the amount A, right? That is what P times B is equal to, and we have P times B, so that should be equal to 75, which is A. Now, setting everything up in an actual equation here, we don't know what the percent P is, so we'll leave P alone. We'll still have P, but then P will be multiplied by B, which is 125. So we have P times 125, and then that will be equal to 75, which is A. All right, so we'll set that equal to 75. And there we have it. That is our setup for solving this problem. We have now set up the basic percent equation. Now all there's left to do is solve for the unknown value, which in this case is the percent P. That P is the variable in this equation that we want to solve for. We need to isolate that P, or in other words, get it by itself. And right now it's being multiplied by 125. So what we should do here is divide both sides of the equation by 125. That will get rid of that value, all right? Because basically what we have here is 125 P, right? 125 is being multiplied by that variable of P. So that's essentially the coefficient of P, and that's equal to 75. So we can get rid of that coefficient by dividing both sides of the equation by 125. All right, so 125 divided by itself is 1. 1 times P is P. So we have P, or the percent, is equal to 75 divided by 125. Now we have our answer, but it is expressed as a fraction. We want to get our final answer for P in the form of a percentage, which we can do, but first I want to simplify this fraction as much as I can. And we can reduce this fraction. Both 75 and 125 have a common factor of 25, right? 75 divided by 25 is 3, and 125 divided by 25 is 5. So you can reduce this fraction to be 3/5. All right, once again, 25 times 3 is 75, 25 times 5 is 125. So we can reduce this fraction to be 3/5. And so now our fraction is in its simplest form. So now let's write it as an actual percentage. And the way that I like to do that is to just multiply that fraction by 100. Okay, because this fraction, 3/5, you could think of it as 3 divided by 5. That's going to be equal to some decimal amount, which would represent our percentage as a decimal. And so if you multiply that by 100, you'll get that percentage, but not as a decimal, just as a regular number. All right, and we can make a nice simplification here. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So you can rewrite this to be 3 times 20, right? We're just rewriting 100 divided by 5 as 20. And then 3 times 20 is 60. So we get 60% as our final answer for P. What we have just found here is that 75 is 60% of 125. right? The question asked what percent of 125 is 75? Well, now we found that it is 60%. Okay, let's take a look at another example. Next up, we have 12 is what percent of 50? And so once again, to solve this problem, we want to translate it into the basic percent equation. And so let's try identifying the different parts. I always like to start with the percentage, which just like last time, we don't know in this problem, right? It says 12 is what percent of 50. So that phrase, what percent, is referring to the value of p, the percentage, okay? Then after that, we have the word of, that refers to multiplication, but then the value after the word of will be the base. That is our value of b. So we have p times b, but that's going to be equal to the amount a, and that word is there does translate to an equal sign, which means that that value 12 is a. All right, so we have p times b is equal to a. That is our basic percent equation. So let's write it out. 12 is a, so we have 12 is equal to the percent p, which we don't know. So we'll write p times the base b, which is 50. So we have p times 50. All right, and so now we have successfully set up the basic percent equation. Now let's solve for our unknown value, which once again is the percentage p. And so we want to isolate or get that p by itself, which we can do in this case by dividing both sides of the equation by 50. Right? P is being multiplied by 50. So let's divide both sides by 50, and that 50 will be gone. All right, so dividing both sides by 50 will result in these 50s canceling out, just leaving you with P on this side of the equation. So you'll get 12 divided by 50 is equal to P. All right, and so now, just like with the previous example, our percentage is currently represented as a fraction, but we do want to write it as an actual percentage. So what I'm going to do here is first reduce this fraction. 12 and 50 can both be divided by 2. 12 divided by 2 is 6, and 50 divided by 2 is 25. So what we get here is that P is equal to 6 divided by 25. That's just the reduced form of this fraction. And then we can multiply that fraction by 100, or really you could have done it at this step as well, but I find that it's easier when the fraction is reduced. But multiplying by 100 will rewrite this fraction as the actual percentage. All right, and always be on the lookout if the denominator of the fraction divides evenly into 100. In this case, it does. 100 divided by 25 is 4. So this just becomes 6 times 4, right? 6 times 100 divided by 25, which is 4. So 6 times 4 gives us 24, and that will be the percentage. 24% is the answer to this problem. 12 is what percent of 50? It's 24% of 50. Okay, that is the final answer to this problem. For our next example, we want to find 18% of 40. All right, and so this sentence is a little bit shorter, but we can still translate it into an equation in the form of the basic percent equation. Let's start by identifying the different parts, and I see 18% right here. That's very clearly the percentage P. Then after that, we have the word of, which represents multiplication, and the value after of will be the base. So 40 is the value of B, which means the value we don't know here is the amount A, the actual portion of the base or the whole number based on this percentage, right? We want to know what is 18% of 40. What is that part of the whole, okay? So this word find here, in this case, will translate to A is equal, right? You want to find the value such that it's equal to P times B. So setting up the equation, this time we don't know A. A will be equal to our percentage P, which is 18%. Writing that as a decimal, it is 0.18. Just take the decimal place of the percentage and move it 2 places to the left, and that will be your fraction as a decimal. And then you're multiplying that percentage by B, which in this case is 40. So we're multiplying 0.18 by 40. All right, now at this point, if you have a calculator, feel free to just take 0.18 times 40 and get your answer. But if you're going to do it by hand, here's how I would recommend doing this calculation. You want to rewrite the decimal as a fraction, and when you have 2 decimal places here, where you're just going out to the hundredths place, you can just rewrite that decimal as those 2 decimal places divided by 100. right? So in this case, A would be equal to 18 divided by 100. That is the same as 0.18. It's also the same as 18%. So we have 18 divided by 100 times 40. Now both 18 and 100 are divisible by 2. 18 divided by 2 is 9, and 100 divided by 2 is 50. So what we get here is that A is equal to 9 divided by 50 times 40. And then at this point, you could take 40 and divide it by 50, right? You could rewrite this to be 9 times 40 divided by 50. You're allowed to do that. When you're multiplying two values and one is a fraction, you can multiply that number into the numerator and then move that numerator out of the fraction, just like I've done here. As long as you're still multiplying everything together, it doesn't matter, but doing it this way allows me to see a nice way to simplify or reduce the fraction, which is that both 40 and 50 can be divided by 10. So you would get 9 times 4/5, right? That is the reduced form of this fraction. And then 9 times 4 is 36, so we get 36 divided by 5. And now be careful here. Remember that in this case, we're not solving for a percentage. This is an actual amount. This is a part of the whole number 40, right? Whatever we have here is 18% of 40. So what we want to do is just write this as a regular number. Okay, let's not write it as a fraction. Let's actually figure out what 36 divided by 5 is. And 5 doesn't divide evenly into 36, so we are going to have to do some side work here. Just set up your long division. We have 36 divided by 5. Since 5 won't divide evenly into 36, you will want to add a decimal place here, so 36.0. For the first place here, 5 does not go into 3, so look at the next number as well. How many times does 5 go into 36? Well, 5 times 7 is 35, so we'll have 7, and then write down 35 and subtract that, and you'll be left with 1.0, or you can just think of it as 10. How many times does 5 go into 10? 2, because 5 times 2 is 10. So I'll write down a 2, subtract 10, we get 0. There's no remainder. Just remember to put in the decimal place. 7.2 is the result of 36 divided by 5. All right, so we get 7.2. That is the final answer to this problem. 7.2 would be 18% of 40. Okay, and so that's it for this example. Let's move on to the next one. Hey there, real quick, before we take a look at the next example, if you find my tutorial videos here at JK Math to be helpful, then I'd like to invite you to join my membership site, JK Math Plus, where you get access to many perks, including bonus content and my exclusive community. The bonus content includes dark mode versions of my videos, extra example problems, and more, while the community is a private space online where you can post questions, have discussions, and study together with me and other members. To learn how to join and see a full list of everything you get access to as a member, you can head over to jkmathematics.com/plus. I'll have a link for that in the description of this video. So if you are interested in becoming a member, feel free to check that out. It's a great way to support me and the tutorials I make, as well as a great way for you to learn math better. But for now, let's take a look at the next example. For this example, we have 75% of what is 6. All right, and so let's get right to it here. Let's start identifying the different pieces from this sentence that would translate to the basic percent equation. The first thing I see here is 75%. That is the percentage P. The word of right here represents multiplication. And then whatever comes after the word of is the base. And in this case, we don't know what it is, right? It says 75% of what? The base in this case is unknown. So that word what refers to the base B, and we don't know what that is, but we do know that 75% of it will be 6, right? That word is translates to an equal sign, and then that value of 6 would be A, the amount that results by taking a percent of the base. All right, and so let's set it up. 75% as a decimal is 0.75. That will be multiplied by B, which we don't know, so I'll write that in. And then that will be equal to A, which we do know this time, it's 6. So we have 0.75b is equal to 6. All right, now in this equation, b is the variable. We want to solve for b. And so to do that, we need to divide both sides of the equation by 0.75. But before we do that, I think it will be helpful if we rewrite that as a fraction. you might have this one memorized. It's a pretty common percentage or decimal, and so you may know that that is equal to 3/4 as a fraction. But if you didn't know that, you could rewrite this decimal like this. You could have 75 divided by 100, and that would be multiplied by b and would be equal to 6. And then that fraction could be reduced by a factor of 25, right? 75 and 100 are both divisible by 25. 75 divided by 25 is 3, and 100 divided by 25 is 4. So you get 3/4 times b is equal to 6. All right, and so now we can isolate b by multiplying both sides by the reciprocal of this fraction. That would be the same thing as dividing both sides by 3/4. Okay, so I'm going to multiply both sides of the equation by 4/3. That is the reciprocal of 3/4. Just flip the numerator and denominator. 4/3 times 3/4 becomes 1. A fraction multiplied by its reciprocal will be equal to 1. So that just leaves you with b, and b will be equal to 6 times 4 divided by 3, or 6 times 4/3. All right, so we have b is equal to 6 times 4, which is 24, divided by 3, and 3 does divide evenly into 24, so that gives us a nice answer of 8, right? 24 divided by 3 is 8, so b is equal to 8. 75% of 8 is 6. That is what we have found here. Or another way that you could phrase that is that 6 is 75% of 8. Okay, 6 was the part of the base that we did not know. Specifically, it was 75% of it, so we know that 6 is 75% of that base 8. For our next example, we have what is 125% of 16? All right, and so let's start identifying the different parts of this sentence. The first thing I see here is a percentage of 125%. That will be our percent P. Then I also see the word of that represents multiplication. And then the value after that word of will be the base B. All right, and then this word is here translates to an equal sign. And so we have P times B, which should be equal to an amount A. All right, so that word what, the value we don't know, is an amount A, which is going to be a part of that base value of 16. Or in this case, it's going to be a little bit more than that value because our percentage is bigger than 100%. It's 125%. So let's set up our equation here. A is our unknown value, so we have A is equal to our percent P, which is 125%, which as a decimal would be 1.25, but then that will be multiplied by the base, which is 16. So we have 1.25 times 16. All right, and so if you have a calculator, feel free to finish off this problem by taking 1.25 times 16. But if you're going to do it by hand, here's how I would recommend going about it. You can rewrite this decimal as a fraction. Since it's 1.25, you would write it as 125 divided by 100. All right, so the amount A would be equal to 125 divided by 100 times 16. But then both 125 and 100 are divisible by 25, right? 125 divided by 25 would be 5, and 100 divided by 25 would be 4. So A would be equal to 5/4 times 16. That is the reduced form of this fraction. And then 16 divided by 4 is 4, so you could just rewrite that as 4 and get that this is equal to 5 times 4, which is 20. 20 is the value of A for this equation, which means that 20 is 125% of 16. All right, that is the final answer to this problem. Let's take a look at one more example for this video. For our last example, we have 37.5% of what is 15. All right, so this one's a little bit tricky because we have a weird percentage, but let's just do what we've done for the other examples to start. Let's identify the different pieces here. Clearly, 37.5% is our percentage P, but then we have the word of, which represents multiplication, and then whatever comes after that word of is the base, which in this case we don't know, right? It says 37.5% of what is 15. So that word what indicates that we don't know what it is, but that is our value of B. Then the word is refers to an equal sign, which means that P times B is equal to A, so 15 is the amount A. All right, and so then writing this out as an equation, starting with 37.5%, Remember that a half as a decimal is 0.5. So what we have here is 37.5%. So to rewrite that as an actual decimal, you want to move that decimal place 2 places to the left. All right, so that gives us 0.375 as the decimal version of that percentage. But then that's multiplied by b, which we don't know. So we'll write in b, and that will be equal to a, which is 15. So now we have our equation set up. We just need to solve for b, which we can do by dividing both sides by this decimal value, which if you have a calculator, you could do pretty quickly. Just take 15 divided by that value, and you'll get the answer to this equation. You'll know what the value of the base b is, but I'm going to do it by hand here. In this case, the decimals go out to the thousandths place. So if I'm going to rewrite that as a fraction, it would be 375 divided by 1000. Okay, that's what's being multiplied by b, and then that's equal to 15. So to isolate b, or to solve for it, we want to divide both sides of the equation by this fraction, or in other words, we want to multiply both sides by the reciprocal of that fraction. So just flip the numerator and denominator, and there's the reciprocal. We're multiplying both sides by that fraction. All right, so on this side, those two fractions just cancel out. Any fraction multiplied by its reciprocal is 1, and 1 times b is b. So we get b is equal to 15 times this fraction, which doesn't look very nice at first. But something to notice here is that 375 is divisible by 15, or one of its factors would be 15. Just to show you that that's true, if you take 375 and divide it by 15, you can't divide 15 into 3, but 15 into 37, it goes in 2 times because 15 times 2 is 30. So you get 2, write down the 30, subtract that, and you're left with 7, right? Because 37 minus 30 is 7. But then drop down the next number, and you get 75. 15 goes into 75 evenly. Specifically, it goes in 5 times. 5 times 15 is 75. So you write down that 5, and now we see that 15 times 25 is 375. So you could rewrite this 375 as 15 times 25. And here's why that's important. We'd have 15 times 1000 divided by 15 times 25, right? I'm just rewriting 375 as the multiplication of 2 factors of that number. And now you have 15 multiplied by this fraction. Well, 15 divided by 15 is just 1. So those two numbers cancel each other out. So b is just equal to 1000 divided by 25, which is a much easier calculation to do. We know that 100 divided by 25 is 4, and so 1000 divided by 25 would be 40. Okay, if you wanted to, you can think of it like this. 1000 is the same as 100 times 10, and you're dividing by 25. 100 divided by 25 is 4, so this would be equal to 4 times 10, which is 40. And so 40 is the value of the base for this basic percent equation. 37.5% of 40 is 15. Or another way to say it is that 15 is 37.5% of 40. That is the answer that we find for this problem. And so with that, this was the last example for this video. But if you do want to get some more practice working with the basic percent equation, I do have some more examples available on my membership site. So if that's something that interests you, feel free to look into becoming a member. You can find all the details on my website at jkmathematics.com/plus. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. But if you don't have any questions, this is all I had for now. So I will see you next time.